Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to Tech Leaders Hub, my dear friends. My guest today is Tsvika Naveh, VP of Platform Engineering and Product at WalkMe. Tsvika, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jacob. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm very excited to have the chance to speak here to the crowd and maybe give some tips. And thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Very happy to have you on the show here today. We're back with more Tech Leaders Hub. This has been a very good month for us. We were streaming a week before, we were streaming 2 weeks before. We're having two streams this week, one today, one on Thursday. Super excited about it. And I'm super excited about you, dear watchers and listeners. Thank you so much for joining Tech Leaders Hub today. Whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, obviously, if you're watching live, that we appreciate that a whole lot. If you can see us and if you can hear us, please leave a comment. Let us know that everything is working correctly. This is very important. This is getting recorded and is going to get turned into an episode of the Tech Leaders Hub podcast later. So it's super important that you leave a comment and let us know. Let us know where you're watching or what you had for breakfast or whatever else you might want. So just leave us a comment. We should be coming to you live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So just do that and we'll know that you're watching. Meantime, Tsvika, I wanted to ask, let's give our audience a few minutes to leave those comments and let us know. Meanwhile, I wanted to ask you for the topic of this session about migrating enterprise systems and keeping the R&D culture alive. Can you tell me who you hope is tuning in? Who do you think will benefit the most from listening to this session? What kind of person, what kind of role, what kind of company, what kind of situation?
So I guess that companies that, startup companies are having new systems and they are less optional for doing immigration soon. So I'm talking about more likely of companies that are been there for 5+ years, that thinking about renewing their system or migrate from one system they develop to a different one. So probably VP R&Ds or R&D directors or group leaders or team leaders that are dealing with such migrations.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, definitely. And if I know anything about Tech Leaders Hub, despite the fairly specific topic we've got today, there'll be more for just tech leaders in general in the topic that we'll be discussing. And actually, we're going to get right to that in just a sec. But first, the comments. Justina is saying loud and clear, awesome. And Jan Plashinsky on LinkedIn is saying all fine. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't hesitate, everybody else watching, to leave a comment as well. And by the way, if you're thinking of asking questions during the session, that's totally fine. There won't be like a dedicated Q&A segment at the end. So if you have questions, please leave them just during the stream, okay? Don't be shy. We'll try to answer them as soon as we can. Very well then, Tsvika. So the way this show works usually is that before we get to your background and even before we get to the main topic at hand, we want to start delivering value right from the start and delivering good tips right from the very start. So I'm going to ask you the traditional Tech Leaders Hub question. And the question is, what is your number one tip for tech leaders?
So my number one tip, and I'm going to say something that might be a bit controversial, and especially for product managers, but I will say don't develop MVP. Yeah, MVPs are minimum viable product, and when we have a new challenge and we want to develop a new system or a new feature or whatever, we always say, okay, let's build an MVP. And when you ask any product manager, at least the ones I've encountered, what's your MVP? You will always eventually get the product manager dream, which is always like 30 or 40% more than what the minimal viable product is. So I would have said chasing this dream usually will take more time, okay? And you will go live when the MVP is ready means that you won't meet your clients before you finish the development. And not meeting your clients means that you won't get feedback. And maybe you can, work a quarter or 2 quarters or even a year without meeting your clients. That's very bad, because you only start to pivot your product and change it by clients' feedbacks only when you go live. So I'm saying, don't develop MVP. Try to develop to bring value to your clients as soon as possible.
Okay, so if I'm getting this correctly, it's a problem where the MVP the scope of it grows to the extent that it's almost like it's not minimal anymore. You wait actually too long to ship. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And can you tell me more about what tech leaders should do instead then? I think you're talking about shipping kind of before it's totally ready. So how do you pick that moment, and how do you start gathering the feedback from the clients? Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so I think that you can look at your MVP, and it's good that you have it there as the guideline, as the target. But then you should break the work into small batches that you can deploy live to production and will still give value to your clients. I can give an example if it helps.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So let's say you want to build, let's say you want to build a partner management system. Okay, you have a company, you have partners, and you want them to be able, to register, to do some actions. You want your support team or sales or whatever, register those partners and start reacting with them. So if you go for the MVP version, you will probably see a partner dashboard with amazing insights and ability to add applications and something big. And if you ask your clients, whether it's internal, even your support team, and just come to them and say, maybe we will just start with the registration phase. There will be no application, just registration. Will it help you? And then they will probably say, oh man, this will save us so much manual work. So even if you develop this, it will be great value to us. So I think that's a good example of taking small chunks that still can give value and be delivered.
Okay, so even a piece of the final solution, or like the MVP scope, even delivering just a piece can already deliver value. So it's worth shipping that before the rest of it is finished. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Awesome. Very cool tip. And I like how you phrased it. It was kind of counterintuitive. So we're going to add it to our collection of number one tips for tech leaders. Maybe make it a kind of a little bit of a clip that we will share about this on the STX Next LinkedIn account. So make sure you follow that. Very well. Thank you for answering that. And let's move on to the next section of the session then. And the next thing I want to ask you about before we get to the topic of migrating enterprise systems and the R&D culture is to ask a little bit about your background, Tsvika, so that the people listening to the session know who they're listening to, where all of this knowledge and experience and all these insights are coming from. So could you briefly tell us about kind of your background, where you are right now, how you got there, maybe a little bit about WalkMe as well, the company you're at right now?
Sure. So I'll start about myself. Well, I'm almost 20 years in the industry, which is exciting because I had the chance to see things from the beginning and how they moved on towards time, from JavaScript to frameworks to Node to React. So it's been an exciting journey. I've started as a developer for about 5 years, and then I moved to my first managerial role as a team leader. Very quick took the position of VP R&D of that startup, and from then on, I had a couple of director level positions of application units or platform units. And in the past 3 years, I've been working at WalkMe. Maybe it's the place to explain what WalkMe is doing. So, so WalkMe is the creator of the world's first digital adoption platform. And what that means is that it's a platform, it's a technology that sits on top of any application and guides you through, guides the users of that application through how to use that application. And through its analytics, WalkMe is able to pinpoint where users struggles the most, and if users are effectively using the application, and what kind of ROI organizations are realizing with their technology investments. So that's basically what WalkMe does.
I remember our conversation about it, and initially, I will admit, it sounded a little bit complex for me what WalkMe does, but eventually the light turned on in my head that it's in the name, right? Let's say one of the users is, this is related to the conversation we had before this session. That, for example, you're onboarding users to, let's say, HubSpot, for example, and you want them to be using HubSpot for, let's say, sales and marketing, which is closer to my context. So what WalkMe does is it literally walks them through how to use HubSpot, and maybe pinpoints, like you mentioned, where they kind of drop off or get frustrated. I think that's immensely useful, especially when you're making these big investments in tools and technologies.
Think about the fact that you replaced HubSpot with something else. Now all those employees that are used to do some kind of process in HubSpot, what do they do now in the new system? So WalkMe guides whatever system they're using.
Okay, yeah, exactly. And they might be resisting that change a little bit, but having something like WalkMe, it can help ease the transition. Again, personally, I see huge value in that, especially after it kind of clicked for me. So I wanted to possibly give that click moment for the audience too. So before we get to the kind of main topic, I wanted to ask you one follow-up question. Given everything you do, the company does, what do you like the most about your job right now?
Oh, well, I must say that the best part in my job is actually the people. I think I have the chance to manage an amazing group of individuals, and it's all start from the people and the culture. And when you build something together and working very hard, eventually when you deliver, you feel it's the sum of the parts is bigger than itself. So
yeah, definitely. And as a manager myself, I can totally relate to that. The people are such a great part of it, and seeing them grow, seeing them achieve things you never thought possible, things you personally can't do, for example, that's amazing. So I really feel that very well. Thanks for answering that. Let's get to the topic at hand then, about migrating enterprise systems and the R&D culture. First, I wanted to ask you, I am going to ask you some questions about like definitions of what we mean by enterprise systems, etc. But first, I thought we might start with a question like, why this topic? What makes this topic that's close to your heart, that's important to talk about? I was wondering if you might shed some light on that.
So I think that we're starting with technology, so there's a question, what kind of migration are we talking about? So migration means that basically we want to renew an existing system. So we can do it by just developing a new system in parallel, hoping for it to replace the current system, or we can just renew the existing system. This is something that I had the chance to do, I think, 3 times in a big company. And I think it's a dramatic situation, like, deciding that you want to renew. And usually the motivation is not so clear. You can even find yourself, from something small, start to carve new system.
Mhm.
So I think everyone are doing it, but no one really talk about it or how to do it great or how to even approach it. And since I had, the experience with it, I feel I can,
Mhm.
talk about it, and I'm very related to it.
Okay, yeah, awesome. So let's try and visualize what kind of situation we're talking about. Like I mentioned, asking for a little bit of a definition. By enterprise systems, what do you mean? By migrating them, what exactly do we mean here? Could you either give an example or help us visualize what kind of situation we're talking about here?
Okay, so when I say enterprise, I mean that most of the time your the internal system, whether it's external pointing to your clients or it's an, I don't know, it's an internal administration system. After a few years, it usually running out of performance, or the UX
Hmm.
becomes very challenging, and you want to renew. You want it to be modern, or you want it to perform, or it's just not stable. Maybe you develop a monolith for 10 years, and then sometime complexity will hit the team, and that's the
Hmm.
time when people say, okay, we just cannot go further with that system, and as a company or as an R&D, we have to dedicate some time now and replace it. And when you decide, the question is how you're going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, is it fair to say that this is migrating systems? Because when I think migration, one thing that's in my mind is, well, coming back to a previous example, we're using HubSpot now. We're switching to Salesforce, for example. But I feel like what you're talking about is a system that you've built, that you've
Mhm.
outgrown, and now you need to build a new one. Is that more accurate to say?
Yeah, that's more accurate, because we're all tech leaders here, and we usually build the
Yeah.
systems our own. So when I'm talking about
Yeah.
migration, I'm talking about migration of a system you've built or someone before you built, and now you need to replace.
Okay, understand. And I was wondering if you could already shed some light on why this topic connects to the topic of culture, of R&D
Mm.
culture, because I am meaning to get a little bit more into how to actually perform this process, how to perform it well. But can you already shed some light on how this is going to connect to the R&D culture aspect?
So culture is very related, in terms that when you have two systems or when you are renewing system, you basically start with something new against, and I'm emphasizing the against the current one, because
Hmm.
if you ask the people that delivered the current system, they will say it's amazing, and they want, most of the time, they won't even
Hmm.
feel the need for renewal or for replacement. So but if people will come out from the outside, they will probably say, oh no, this could be look more modern, or it doesn't perform well, and you have a cultural gap here. And if
Yeah.
those people are in the same group, you will have tension as well. So this is
Okay.
where it's related to culture.
I understand. So, can you tell me a little bit more about, before we get to the how of actually doing it? I want to kind of build an image of what the risk is here. If you don't migrate your system, or if you do it wrong, how can it go wrong? What are the possible, negative consequences here?
So that's a great question, I must say. I think that it can reach up to the level of really, I don't want to say taking apart a company, but this can be really painful. Why? Because
Hmm.
usually companies invest lots of money in new system. They have very high expectations for that system, and it takes time. It takes a few years usually. Maybe it's a 1 year, 2 years, but then they say, okay, we invested so much. What's the value in it? And these are hard projects, so it's it's hard to satisfy the founders or whoever is the owner of the system. And since it's a very long project, it's hard to show the value from the beginning unless you develop by value, as I spoke before.
Yeah.
So I think that also from the culture aspects, if you don't do it correctly and you generate two groups of current versus new, whether it's new people or those who are dealing with the new system versus those who are dealing with the current system, you likely cause a failure by the fact that you will have two rival groups instead of two groups working together for the same cause.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect conditions for conflict to happen, basically, between the two groups, each wanting to either stay with the old system or stick closer to the new one. I can absolutely see that. Very well then. So I think we can see what is at stake here when it comes to making such a change. You mentioned you have experience in this. I think the watchers and listeners are definitely going to want to hear about, well, then how do you go about migrating such systems? And before we get into that, I just wanted to leave one more reminder. Watchers and listeners, if you have any questions about the specifics of what Tsvika is talking about, do not hesitate to ask questions. And with that, let's dive in. So let's say, you're facing this kind of situation. Can you kind of set the scene of what the step one is for this kind of process? Can you tell us how to actually do that?
Okay, so I don't think that there's a recipe for that, but maybe starting from the challenges that you will encounter, I think it's a good start, and then we can say what we should do. So we talked about the cultural problem. Okay, we talked about people. We talked about the fact that we want them to work together towards a new system or system renewal, and not against each other. So I think that there's one major thing to remember here before you start. What's the first thing that every tech manager or a developer, when he comes to a new company, the first thing he say is usually, "Oh, the old developer that wrote all this, we need to throw. It's a throwaway code." That's the most common one. So I think that it should be treated differently. I think that this old code is usually the best code. Why? Because it's been tested by your clients for, I don't know, for many years. It's been tested to all the extreme edge cases. It's been there. It's performing. It's contained a lot of knowledge about the how-tos of the company. And this is the first thing you should remember. Okay, if you throw it away, you throw the company knowledge. So
I would even go one step further. I mean, my point of reference is using external tools, so maybe it won't exactly apply. But if it's anything similar, when you have an existing system that's been in place for a few years, even if there are things that it doesn't do, or even if there are issues, these issues are known, they're documented, there are existing workarounds for them. And that's something that you're also throwing away when you're migrating to a new system. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. It's straight to the point. And we as I don't know, tech people, we usually like to have the newest technology, to write the newest code, to reinvent everything, to write it more generic, or so it's a natural thing we tend to do. So the first thing to remember is that respect it. It's there for a reason. It's very solid, and you better use it instead of going against it. So so that's the first thing. And with that in mind, you can build the team or the mixture of people, the relevant mixture that will help you to move forward. And I think that you should have a mixture of people who knows the domain, who've been there, who knows all that. And from the other side, let's say you want to switch technology along the way, you need those people who are very experienced in the new technology. But trying to put them together and just say, okay, let's roll, let's let's renew won't work either, because those who are there need to be connected to the motivation of why are we doing it, because they think it's great. So you should show them. You should show them the KPIs. You should understand. You should even take those new guys and let them work on the current system. Just do some development or a quarter on the current system and see how it feels. They from the new guys side, they will understand what's going on and what the system is good about and what's not. And then we can discuss together.
I actually have a question, sorry, just related to that. Could you maybe share a few examples of what these KPIs might be like? Is it like performance of a database? Is it something else? Can you shed some light on that?
So I think performance can be measured in multiple ways. Okay, it can be measured in amount of support tickets. Okay, let's say that people all the time complains that it doesn't work, and those who are there for a long time, they just they used to it. It sounds normal, but for someone that comes from the outside, 10 tickets a day sounds like we have a problem. So amount of support tickets can be one. The second one, as you mentioned, can be technical performance, whether it's load time or stability. Maybe the system is unstable and going down a lot. Amount of errors, or as you said, performance of database, or maybe I would have take the most common use cases. Okay, because maybe things are working great, but the important stuff takes long. If you're, I don't know, if you perform a publish operation and it takes 20 seconds, you probably want to renew the publish, right? So look for those bottlenecks and agree that they should be renewed, and work towards those specific KPIs and solve them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for adding that in. So you were talking about connecting the team to the why, maybe letting the team focus on the new, still work on the old system to get some context. Could you kind of continue that thread?
Okay, so we talked about the right mixture of people, the right motivations, and then we can start work. So I think we have two ways of doing that. One is really
okay. So before that, sorry to jump in, but I was actually curious about this. So before we get into a whole different part of the topic, about the team mix, then does that team include developers? Does it also additionally include, for example, designers? Can you tell more about kind of the specific people on that team?
So it's everyone are working differently, and there's no one way to work. But
of course.
I think that in the technical aspect, mostly, even if you will have the developers, okay, but you will just show them what we are measuring, they will understand. But I guess that on a system that needs a renewal, you will hear a lot of feedbacks from the designers and the UX. They probably been waiting for ages to replace that page. And the product managers. So I would have put everyone in the same room and try to decide what is the biggest bottleneck, or what is the thing that we really need to replace the most, and prioritize it. Say what's more, what's the most problematic thing for our clients. You should work by what's important to your clients.
Okay, so I'm visualizing the team. It's got developers, it's got designers, product people are in there. Are we missing anything? That's, I mean, like you said, every company is going to be different, but typically, possibly, who else might be there?
So I guess, you always have the infrastructure itself. So we will probably need DevOps or cloud engineers that will come and help us to set the right architecture for a new system, or maybe even shade light on what simple improvements we can do to fix the current one.
All right. So we've got and thank you for adding that in. We've got the team, we've got the why. I think you were mentioning there were some possible paths here from that point on.
Okay. So you can go in the path of just building a complete new system on the side, which I had the experience to do, and I think that people tend to go there because they say the current system is too complex. Let's just let's start something new on the side, and usually it's true that when you develop something new, it's much easier because you're on clean slate. There's no dependencies, no exist coupling, nothing. You can develop whatever you want. So it's a path to go. I think that the main problem here is the product parity, because basically you have an entire company, an entire business working on one system. This is how we make the money. This is how the company. This is the milking cow of the legacy of the company, and then we try to develop a new system. And even for your team, after 1 year, 2 years, or half a year, you developed a new system and you want everyone to use it. But when it reach to the business side, they will point on few features that are missing. For you, it sounds like it's like it's not a common features. It's not that important. It's just edge cases. But for them, it's a difference between, I don't know, it's a 10% difference between a deal in the legacy system and a deal in the new system. So it's
It might be some feature that's like, it might be a difference between one tier of the pricing or another tier, and it might be something that actually pushes people to get the enterprise pricing because it's something security related. So it might seem not super important at this point, but it actually it gets the sales, right? That's how I envision it, at least.
Yeah, you are right. And in this case, you will just have a no-go from the business side. So basically, everyone develop a shiny new system with the shiniest technologies, but the business doesn't want to move there. So what do you do then? So you say, okay, I will build those features for you. Okay, give me some more time. But what we need to remember is that the current system is still evolving. People are still developing new features there. And you find yourself in a chase, in an endless chase of feature parity. You need to have parity between those two systems, and it never ending.
Wow, yeah.
So,
I can see how that can be a huge challenge, and it might make the whole migration fail to some extent.
yeah. So even if you build something new, you need the business agreement to move there, and that you have two options: or to stop the development of the current system, to try to close the gap, which no one wants. It's it's for our clients. It's give the value for our clients. So what do we do? Stop investing in our clients.
And it's testing their patience, right? They see that there haven't been any updates for a quarter, 2 quarters. They keep saying the new system is coming, but you're going to bleed users that way for sure.
Exactly. So if you ask me from my experience, I wouldn't go there on the building parallel system, because I didn't had the chance to see it succeed. So I would have rather go on renewing the exist system. Okay, I think it's a better approach, because as you said, you're reducing the expectation. You give small values each time. People are happy. They see the progress. Your clients feel the progress, and you even reduce the maintenance costs of the current system, because you renew part of it. So you reduce the maintenance cost, you bring values to your clients, and the business is happy and the clients are happy. So I think that's the best approach. But it's a bit harder. Okay, it's a bit harder because replacing components in a system, maybe it doesn't look that good. Maybe one component in a single application is not good enough. Maybe the code is very, very complex and there are some technical problems. So it is challenging as well. So there are challenges everywhere. But
of course. So I suppose the first question that comes to mind for this other path, which it seems to have a lot of upside. So I'm tempted to ask some how questions here. So if we're migrating parts of the system, if we're doing this piece by piece, and the two are going to kind of coexist, where you're using, one application, but it's got parts of the old, parts of the new, how do you pick the parts that you replace first? Is it a matter of what can we replace, what is more modular than the rest, or is it a matter of what's more important to the business? Could you try to illuminate that a little bit?
So it's a very good question. I think we discussed it before and say we need to prioritize, but what's the most problematic or most impactful on your clients. We need to make sure that if we have new people here, we also need time for learning curve. Whether we are migrating a system from, let's say, Angular to React. Okay, so we need training. It's a production system. We need to gain trust and experience, and have from this point of the picture, we can start with small components. Okay, first let's build an infrastructure that we can replace a single component inside a script. So inside a page, if I have this infra, we can start building new components. So we can start from the UI, and for the UI to work, you need good APIs. If you will use the old APIs, you will probably encounter the complexity of a legacy system.
Yeah.
So I would have suggest that you start with new APIs. Even the fact that you declare new clear APIs that do what they should do, it's a good start. So you have a new UI component that connect to a new API, and this new API in the background can go to the old system, but your front end side of the system is renewed. Okay, and you already see the value because the UX is better, and everyone are using the same new API. So that's first. So I would have say go for APIs first, then connect them to new components of UI, and then eventually build the backend of that system to replace the exist functionality. And this is a very deep topic of how to migrate from from monolith to microservices, how to change microservices technology, maybe change a programming language or something like that. But you can just add the same service, add a new one. They will live in parallel. They will serve the same API. You will monitor their replies. How do they operate? And when everything is good, when you are confident that you can switch it in production, you move to the new service. So UI, API, backend, and eventually, what I can say is just save the data for last.
The data for last.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell us why?
Because data migrations are usually hard. The data usually hides complexities and coupling of modules. And you can build an entire new system with a different data structure. But then what happens when you want to migrate? What you want the old your current users to use the new system, but the data structure is different, so you can't support back. So you have an option to say, okay, use this new feature from this moment on, and you will have all this new functionality. But you can have like two different parts of the system. You want the same old data, the same old content to work renewed. So I say renew everything, don't touch the data part. And when everything is renewed and you have dividing a monolith or dividing such a legacy system into microservices gives ownership, give a domain to the teams that are doing it. And when the mission of migrating the UI and API and new service is over, then you have the time and the confidence to say, okay, now let's refine the data inside our new service database, and it will likely to cause less problems than doing it from the start.
Okay, so am I getting the order right? It's UI first, API second, right?
Yeah, I would have go to API even first, but it doesn't really matter. It,
Oh,
it
okay.
can be even parallel.
API,
Yeah,
UI, backend, data.
yeah, I think that's a
Okay.
good rule of thumb.
Okay, just wanted to summarize that because that's something. It's catchy, it's catchy. I think some people might remember that from the session. Okay, so API, UI, backend, data. Before we move on, what I have lined up next is to talk about the aspect of the teams. You already touched upon it just a little bit. I suppose one thing I wanted to clear up before that is, even if you're thinking of the APIs, I imagine there are multiple. And so when starting this process, do you start changing like a small piece that is not so often used to minimize the risk? Or do you rather go for something that is more important to the KPIs and more important to the business to show value early? Like, within this balance, which direction do you think is better?
So again, it's a great question. I think that if you're dealing with infrastructure, let's say it's the first time you're dealing with new APIs and you change it from REST API to GraphQL.
Hmm.
Now you have GraphQL system that never seen production and never seen traffic, and you need to
Okay.
test it. So
Yeah.
if it's the first thing that you do in the system, I would go small. I would go, for the least used APIs
Okay.
and have it there in the infra. And when the infra is ready and you gain trust and you monitor it heavily and you see that it all works correctly, then you start going for the heavier APIs. And once you're sure that the infra is correct, so you just go for the APIs.
Okay. Okay. So basically, low risk first, especially if you're dealing with these kind of
Infrastructure.
strong changes of an entirely new technology. That's
Mhm.
all clear to me. So it sounds like basically what we're talking about is to have this more. I have it in the outline, so I just wanted to say those words. It's a more. It's similar to lean product development, right? In the sense that you go piece by piece, you go small. It's that approach, but just towards migration. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, totally. I think that the lean the lean movement is all around. Like it's I
Yeah.
had the chance to lead product management in the past year and a half, which is not that trivial for usually someone that managed the R&D. And I was very excited about it because I gained a lot of experience. And to me, it was all connected because you start lean with the value to your clients from one hand, and then you start
Yeah.
lean with how you test your systems, and you start lean with uh, um, taking those specific use cases that are very common to your clients, and you do them first. So it's all connected to lean development. We can discuss also how to do lean development, whether it's agile or scrum or whatever. I think that the
Yeah.
most important thing is bringing value to clients as soon as possible. And in order to
Yeah.
do that, you have to work in small batches of real value to clients.
Yeah. I'm glad you're repeating that point, actually, because I think it's super important. It's one of those insights where it's like you can't stress it enough. I feel bringing value to clients in marketing is like bring value to the audience, and we get lost in the woods too when we forget about that, and we want to do something like fancy and flashy, but then we remind ourselves, let's bring value first. So thanks for mentioning that once again. Very well. So I feel like we talked a little bit about kind of the way to approach this, the kind of order of the particular activities here. We haven't touched so much about on the culture and team structure aspect of it. So I definitely wanted to touch upon that next. All of these changes, the way they are structured, the kind of the system you proposed, going piece by piece instead of two big parallel systems, how does that influence the team structure? How does that influence the culture? How do you approach this as a tech leader?
So culture, I think, correlates to the team. We have Conway's law, and it means that your architecture is as your culture. But I think that it's even reached to a point of how the team communicate. Like if you have a very well communicating team, the architecture will be different than a team that doesn't know how to communicate. I'll give you an example. Yeah. If you look at services that were built by people who's not so strong in communication, they will say, why do I need to communicate? It's all there in the API. It's documented. You can just, use it, play with it, and let me know if you need any additional feature. From the other hand, you can see teams that are very well communicating. Everyone knows them. They give great service. You can just ask a question and they will happily deliver what you need. But then you see that the API is not that solid, that they have many APIs for many, many different use cases and edge cases, and maybe they're not documented enough, so you need to communicate. So it's great, they are communicating, but you can do it without it. So I think that you can see the culture in how team communicates.
Yeah. So are you saying that, for the purposes of making a system, making a theory here, for the purposes of making a system more future proof, it's actually better to have this team that maybe doesn't directly communicate so much, but they document, they make things self-explanatory? Or is it not so clear cut that one is better than the other?
Yeah, I don't want to judge here. I'm just saying, that there are two different approaches. And they can both work. But the problem starts when you have a team that very well communicating with a team that doesn't communicate. They start to complain. Why I can talk to them? You don't need to talk to them. Just use the API, and vice versa. They say, why do I need to ask them? Why aren't they API are straightforward? So these are the things you will see. But if we're going to dive deeper into maybe more kind of giving tips of how to do this enterprise migrations, I think of giving an example, such as, let's say that we're building an administration system. Okay, it's a back office, and it's built from multiple pages. That each page is a different module, developed and owned by different team. So in the beginning, you have like the owning team domain. They start to build their admin, and then new team want to join in and want to show their module inside. So you have two approaches of doing that. You can use monorepo, let's say, and everyone are using the same source of code and working on the same project together. And when the external team tries to push something to production, they need to go through the owning team, and the owning team need to approve this commit and merge it to production. And when you have, when you start with it and you have 2 teams or 3 teams, that's good. That can work only by communication. But what happens when you have 20 teams that delivering on the daily base on this system? This is where the clashes will start to happen. And in order to avoid that and have better life to everyone, you can build a system in an architecture that will serve multiple teams. So you can start with, let's say, not a monorepo, but a a shell of an application that knows to load iframes or UI components, and each iframe like that shows a module of a different team. It gives them a complete independence. They don't need to verify the other team code. They don't need to deal with production failure. We can monitor it. We can alert it. But there is a trade-off. If you start from the beginning with such infrastructure that will give you the ability to serve multiple teams, it will be costly. Okay, so you probably don't want to start with that because you will have only 2 months. I'm throwing numbers here, but let's say it will be a big task to build the infrastructure to serve all teams. Now, when you start with 1-2 teams, you don't really care for it. So you have a team that will say, I must build the infra first. I need 2 months for that. And you say, why? We are missing value to the client in 2 months. Let's do it in 1 week. So the question is how much you want to invest. And I think that you shouldn't start big because, again, we're delaying value to our clients. So you should start small, but expect the worst. Like know or set the KPI of when are we going to invest in this infrastructure. Like maybe when we have 10 projects inside, okay? Then we need to invest more in building the correct infrastructure to help multiple teams build our application.
Okay, so it's like you set up a trigger. At the moment when we reach a certain amount of teams, a certain amount of modules, we slow down, build the infrastructure, then continue building kind of the main thing.
Exactly. This will help the owning team to be motivated because when they will start, they will say, oh no, we are seeing the headache coming. Let's build it from the beginning. And from the other side, you say, okay, guys, but we need to move on. We need to give value to our clients. So let's move fast. But let's agree on the KPI that we will switch the system and invest in something big.
That is an extremely smart approach, I have to say. It's a balance that I think everybody can feel. You know, do you build fast or do you build right from the very beginning? And it's been a while since I heard such a clear-cut answer to this. That well, it can't be both at the same time. Start fast, but set a trigger when exactly, and know it in advance when exactly you're going to switch to the little bit slower but more scalable mode. That's great that you share that on techleadershub. Thanks for that. Okay, so the next question I was actually meaning to ask, and holy crap, we're kind of running out of time here quite quickly, is but is there a way that this migration process could literally influence team structure? During a migration like this or after such a migration, do teams get reshuffled? Do teams get kind of reassembled, people changing roles? Or is that something that can happen, does happen, should happen? I was curious about that.
So from the experience I had, people tend to build a new team for a new system. And we already discussed it a bit, but my suggestion is don't do it because then again you will encounter the tension we were speaking about. So just have the right mixture of people, of teams, and divide the team by domain. I always believe, especially if you are breaking a monolith, that this is part of the problem. It's also connected between the architecture and culture of one big monolith or one big system without the correct domain of each team means that everyone knows everything, everyone are doing everything, but when you grow big, it doesn't scale. So you have to have teams that are owning a specific domain, and then you have to give them the independency of controlling their domain. They don't want to be alerted at night for a failure that they didn't cause. And if it's a monolith, everyone are waking up at night. So So you need to divide.
I understand. So can you say in a few words examples of such domains? What might that look like for an example system, just so we can visualize it a little bit better?
Okay. So I will give examples from the current unit we have in WalkMe. So let's say we want to give a domain of when you guys can be focused of when the client's signing a contract to when he's ready to use the system. So it means you are responsible for security, you're responsible for setup and configuration, you're responsible for accounts and user provisioning. So this makes sense, because it's kind of end to end. Okay, they're responsible for the entire flow, but still, it's not. From this moment on, it depends what the system does. But let's say it's WalkMe, so it's building content and recording videos and publish and doing runtime. It's different domains. So this can be a good example for a domain of a team. And then, it depends how big is the team. It can be even a group of 20 developers or 5 developers. So it's just a question of how big is the system.
So it's basically, in this case, it's a chunk of the user journey, a segment of it with a clear start point and end point that they're owning, and that's their domain. That's totally clear. Tsvika, I feel like we haven't gotten to the end of the subject, not by a long shot, but we're actually, unfortunately, getting to the end of this session. Some people are already feeling it. Somebody on YouTube said, "Nice talk, thanks." Well, I may be a little bit biased, but I thought it was very nice. One last question from me before we get to your announcements, 2 words about STX Next, and finishing the session. Within this topic, it's like I always ask this because I'm paranoid that I'm going to miss something important, and I want to give you an opportunity to fill that in. Is there anything that before we go offline, anything that I neglected to ask you about that you would like to add to this topic, something that's especially important, something that's missing, or something that you want to re-emphasize before we wrap things up?
No, I actually feel that the lean product is kind of summarizes everything. Start small, have a clear vision of the end goal. I always start from there. So start from the big picture, but go in small steps with KPIs, so you know how you are proceeding, and think about the culture issues that you will have. We tend to start and go fast, but culture is also something that we need to take under consideration when having new project.
Yeah, think big and start small. That's one of the key takeaways for me here. And again, this concept of start fast, set a trigger for when we're going to go back and think about the structure. That was super key for me here. So from my end, I wanted to reemphasize that once again. And all right, with just a couple minutes left on the clock, that is going to be it for the session today in terms of what we have to discuss. Tsvika, thank you so much for everything you shared. We should do like a follow-up for this, I feel. But we can talk about that once we're off the air. While we still have people here, while they're still watching and listening, do you have any announcements, anywhere you want to direct them, anything they should do, anything you want to share with our audience today?
So I can just say that at WalkMe, which is a great company and with lots of technical challenges from all aspects, whether it's cloud engineering and multiple clouds and project management. We have some openings even in these days, whether it's backend developers or front-end developers or DevOps engineer, that we are heavily working in that area. So you guys are all welcome to even ping me directly in LinkedIn, and we can discuss it and sort something out. And just saying thank you for having me, Jacob. It was wonderful, and it was my pleasure.
It was my pleasure too. So everyone, Tsvika is hiring. Go look him up on LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about that, I assume you can also check that on the WalkMe careers page. So we all encourage you to. Sorry.
Yeah, I will also. I prepared for this session, so I wrote a nice summary about this entire topic. So I will post it in Medium or another blog, and if you want, I will share the link later on. So
That would be awesome. Definitely, if you can go back to the session and leave it in the comments, for example, I think that's going to be super useful for our audience. Very well. Now, for the people who might be meeting SDX Next for the first time, hello. SDX Next is the company that is bringing you Tech Leaders Hub. We're a software development company based in Poland, but very much international right now. And what we do, very briefly, is we help you build software better and faster. If your tech stack is based on Python, JavaScript, .NET, and you want to go to market faster, have better quality, and smoothen your processes, then we at SDX Next can help you do that end to end, all the way from discovery and design through development, deployment, adding on top of it machine learning, adding additional technologies that you might need, data engineering, and everything else that you might require. So if you're interested in boosting your software development or making it more cost effective in 2023, you should go to sdxnext.com to learn more about that. For more Tech Leaders Hub, by the way, go to techleadershub.com, or the simplest way is to follow SDX Next on LinkedIn, where you will get updates, clips from previous episodes, and you will learn all about upcoming episodes from the SDX Next channel as well. Third announcement I've got, and I've actually got 4, so stick with me here. Third announcement I've got is, if you're watching this and you're a CTO, SDX Next is actually running another project called the Global CTO Survey. You should go to thectosurvey.com. It's important that it's thectosurvey.com. And if you're in a CTO role or similar top-level engineering role at your company, fill out the survey. You'll be the first to get the report about what other CTOs are doing, if you're curious about that, in 2023. And you'll also get some special offers, discounts, and free stuff from our partners. So go check that out. And last, but definitely not least, we have another Tech Leaders Hub session lined up just 2 days after this Thursday, January the 26th. Adrian Moreno-Peña from SumUp, Director of Engineering, will be our guest. And the most exciting thing is I will not be hosting that one. We're going to have Natasha Mikołajczak from SDX Next as another host that we're adding to the Tech Leaders Hub roster. So I urge you, please be here on Thursday. Support Natasha in her new role, and we've got a very interesting session lined up for you. Just look up SDX Next on LinkedIn for more information about that. You can even look up my profile, or you can look up Natasha Mikołajczak's profile, and we posted about it recently, so you can learn more about that there. Thank you very much for sticking with me through these announcements. We just keep doing more stuff, so there's more to talk about at the end of each session. But anyway, for this one, that's actually the end. Thank you so much for joining us. Tsvika, do you have any last things to add before we go offline?
Well, thank you very much for hosting me. If any questions from the audience, even later on, just feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah, definitely. Tsvika gets back to you really quickly, at least from my experience. So you can ping him on LinkedIn. And that's it for Tech Leaders Hub today. I'm done for the week, but Tech Leaders Hub isn't. So we'll see you on Thursday, and definitely for more Tech Leaders Hub in February. Look forward to information about that. For today, that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. I'm clicking end broadcast now. Bye-bye.